What a banner year for the WCC. This is Gonzaga Nation SI. I'm your host, Dan Dickau. Going to quickly recap the WCC season and just how good it was. It was an absolute banner year. Everybody knew Gonzaga was going to be extremely good. Preseason top three in basically every publication coming into the season after a undefeated run through last year and an unfortunate loss in the title game to Baylor. It will be only a matter of time before Gonzaga finally breaks through and gets their first title, but unfortunately for Zag fans, it was not this season. They ended up at 28-4, 13-1 in league play, where they won another league title. It's seemingly rinse repeat for the Zags to win their conference title, as well as be in the WCC conference tournament title game, where they've been in it now for 25 straight years, 23 straight NCAA tournaments for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. But we'll recap Gonzaga's season in their own episode coming up later this week. But the WCC, again, like I said, banner year. 6 teams were in the postseason. 3 of those in the NCAA tournament. The Zags, obviously the number 1 overall seed, lost in the Sweet 16 to Arkansas. St. Mary's, a tremendous season in their own right. 26-8, 12-3 in conference. Knocked off Gonzaga when they were ranked number 1 in the regular season finale in Moraga. And then they had a great run in the NCAA tournament. First round win. Followed up by a first round win against Indiana, where they absolutely dominated the game. They won 82-53 before losing to UCLA in the round of 32. But a great season for Randy Bennett. He won the Coach of the Year award in the WCC. They've got some question marks, though. Tommy Kuhse has been a part of that program now for 6 years. Started as a walk-on, earned his way, became an unbelievably vital player the last 2 years. Had a few struggles early in this season, but at the end of the year, it was all about Tommy Kuhse and getting the ball in his hands and putting him in pick and rolls and making plays. So they're going to have to figure out how they replace Tommy Kuhse. Augustas Marciulionis could be the answer. He started a number of games this season, didn't score it the way that a lot of people thought he might coming in, but he's got the pedigree and the resume from Europe that he could be a really good player. Question, will Logan Johnson come back? With the COVID year, everybody's kind of in flux. They've gotten an opportunity to come back. So we'll see if Logan Johnson comes back, as well as Matthias Toss. He should be back, but how much does he improve? As well as how much does Kyle Bowen, Mitchell Saxon, and Jabe Mullins improve? St. Mary's, they've built a culture of understanding that you're going to improve your first couple of years, and if you do, you'll have an opportunity to be a huge part of the rotation and a contributor your last couple of years. So a big part for those guys I just mentioned is, have they bought in particular Saxon and Jabe Mullins and Marciulionis? Have they bought in? Are they improving? And are they going to kind of develop into those bigger pieces of the St. Mary's program? But all things being said, a season ago, they battled some injuries. A season ago, they didn't perform up to St. Mary's standards, but they were back in a big way this year. I wouldn't expect them to take much of a dip or a dive at all. They are a very good basketball program. Third place in the WCC this year, the Santa Clara Broncos, a big-time surprise for a lot of people. They were 21-12, 10-5 in WCC play. They were third in the league, but they didn't make the NCAA tournament, even though they finished ahead of San Francisco. San Francisco's analytics, some of their big wins, allowed them to have a better resume. But Santa Clara had a tremendous year. Josip Vrankic came back for his extra COVID year and really was phenomenal for the Broncos, and Herb Sendick throughout the year. He was out with mono for about 8 games. In those games, they went 4-4. Then it took them a couple games to kind of get back into the flow. But that's the big question for them right now, is how do you replace the scoring and the rebounding, the playmaking from that front court position that Josip Vrankic, I mean, he was essentially a 5-year starter in Santa Clara. heart and soul of that program over the last few years. How are they going to replace him? PJ Pipes was a great grad transfer from Wisconsin Green Bay. It'll be interesting to see the direction Herb Sendek goes at the point guard spot. Maybe the biggest question mark in the entire league, though, Jalen Williams. He battled throughout the course of the regular season for the scoring title in the WCC. A junior from the Phoenix area has continued to improve each season. I think he's got NBA talent. I think at some point he will be in the NBA. Question is, does he go now? I would imagine he'll test the waters and then come back to college after finding out what the evaluators are really looking at in regards to his game. But the question is, does he come back to Santa Clara, or does he go in the portal with the one-time transfer rule and go to a quote-unquote bigger program, a bigger name, and try to make a splash there, which is happening all over college basketball. So that's something to keep an eye on. Fourth place, the Dons out of USF. Amazing season for Todd Golden and crew. They have probably the most question marks of anybody in the league. But they're good questions to have to answer because of how successful their season was. They made it to the NCAA tournament for the first time since 1989. They were 24-10, 10-6 in league. They could have actually had a couple other wins. They had a couple nail biters, lost a single possession game to BYU, lost a single possession game to St. Mary's. They ended up having one of the most exciting games in the NCAA tournament where they lost to Murray State in the first round in overtime, where Jamari Bouye exploded for 36 points. If you weren't following the WCC and how good a player he's been over the last 4 or 5 years, you would have been shocked and surprised. But if you followed him and seen him, you would have been happy for the kid, knowing he got to perform on the biggest stage and perform very well. So the couple things that USF has to really answer is Todd Golden, head coach, heads to Florida on a tremendous contract, an opportunity for him. So we wish Todd Golden the best of luck. But associate head coach Chris Gerlofson's taken over. I would imagine similar ideas with a few tweaks, which is usually what happens when an associate head coach takes over. A lot of times they've got a lot of the same philosophies, but a few tweaks that they want to implement that fits their eye a little bit better. So that'll be important to watch and see how he views the transfer portal, how he recruits, and then how he prepares and has his team play next year. And if he will be as analytic heavy and three-point shot heavy as Todd Golden, I would imagine so. But the Dons, they got to replace Bouye. One of the best guards on the entire West Coast was actually named Lou Henson Mid-Major Player of the Year just in the past couple days. They got to replace him. Shabazz has another year. What does he do? Does he come back? Does he go professional? Does he transfer out for his COVID year? And then the other guys that are on the younger end for USF, how do they improve? And that's Josh Coonan to me, who I think has a lot of potential. That's Zane Meeks, who had some big moments at times throughout the season, but he wasn't necessarily consistent. And Julian Rishwain, a really good shooter. Can he add to his arsenal and kind of complete his game a little bit? So recap of the Dawn season, which again exceeded expectations, was awesome to see a team in the NCAA tournament from the WCC besides the Zags, St. Mary's, or BYU, which leads us to BYU. Maybe the I don't want to say the most disappointing team on the season, because they still made the NIT. They still won a game in the NIT. They were still 24-11. They were 9-6 in league, but when you know the expectations that are placed on that program, you would think that they didn't live up to those expectations. But a lot of that was due to injuries. They had a couple injuries early in the season to their front court rotational players. That kind of threw them in flux, had to change the way that they played. In the past, they've always had a couple bigs that they could depend on for interior defense and rebounding and being great screen setters. When the injuries occurred, they kind of lost that. And so they had to throw freshman Facini Traore into the lineup, and he was tremendous. He had a number of double-doubles over the course of the year. I would expect him, even though he's an undersized big, to continue to be an impact player in the WCC before they move to the Big 12. Because we all know they're moving to the Big 12. They've been really excited about it. but that's going to be a heck of a jump for them. They've got a lot of improvements that are going to be necessary to make. But the biggest thing for them is how do they replace Alex Barcelo? Started his career at Arizona as a transfer, really made an unbelievable career out of his time in Provo. Great three-point shooter, was the heart and soul of that program over the last 3 years or so. Mark Pope on many occasions talked about just how valuable he was. So who is going to replace the value and the importance of Alex Barcelo will be something to watch. University of Portland, the Pilots, on our first-year coach, Shante Leggins. Check this. They had a winning record at 19-15. It's been a long time since that has been the case. Eric Reveneau had them competing for that third and fourth spot in the WCC for a couple different stretches. Terry Porter really wasn't able to get anything going, but Shante Leggins has really done a nice job. 7-7 in league, which was a surprise because they hadn't won a league game in 2 years. They got a good nucleus of freshmen and sophomores, Tyler Robertson, Moses Woods, a couple of those guys that it's just going to be interesting to see. Do they stay? Do they go into the transfer portal? Because that's the name of the beast in college basketball now. And then how do they improve? And what does Shante Leggins do to keep the program moving in the right direction? They were in a postseason tournament, obviously not the NIT or the NCAA, but it was another postseason tournament where they actually got a win. So that was great for the program to kind of get a boost of momentum and get going. I think that should help in recruiting when you can say that we won a postseason game, and it's an experience boost for the players that will be returning. The Toreros of San Diego next. They're a program in transition. They let Sam Scholl go after the season. Have not hired a head coach as of yet, and most of the team is in the transfer portal, including probably their best returning player, point guard, who's from San Diego, Wayne McKinney Jr. They exceeded expectations with their record this year. They hovered around 500, both in league and overall, for quite some time, but it wasn't enough, and Sam Scholl was let go. So unfortunate to see. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a great coach. He'll land on his feet somewhere, but the Toreros will be a program in flux over the next few weeks until they find a coach. The Tigers of Pacific from Stockton. Leonard Perry in year one took over under really difficult circumstances because Damon Stoudemire left so late to go to the NBA and be an assistant coach with the Boston Celtics. So Leonard Perry really kind of had to put together a roster on the fly. And the biggest thing he had to do was get guys to believe and compete. And quite frankly, I think they did that. Their talent level wasn't what Damon Stoudemire had over the last couple of years, where they were challenging for fourth and fifth, which I think is a tremendous achievement for Pacific, considering where the program had been before Damon Stoudemire. But they were 8-22 on the season, 3-11 on the year in the conference. I think in year one, Leonard Perry did a really nice job. It'll be interesting to see the pieces that he kind of pinpoints, evaluates, and is able to recruit to Stockton, because it's not easy. But he showed some nice signs for that program in year one. For Loyola Marymount in year two of Stan Johnson, frustrating, I'm sure, is the easiest thing to say for him and his staff, his players, as well as fans of the Lions, because I thought he did a tremendous job in year one. And then year two, COVID hit them at times. They had a couple stretches where they had pauses. They had injuries, in particular to their projected starting point guard, Jalen Anderson. And they weren't ever able to really to get on the same page and play with any type of continuity because of injuries. But they're going to lose one of the most dominant players statistically in the WCC over the last 5 years, and that's Eli Scott. He was a threat to be a double-double every night out. Didn't always impact the win-loss column in a positive side on the wins, but you knew as an opponent you had to prepare for him. You had to be ready because he was going to play hard and he was going to be impactful, at least in the stat sheets. So they're going to have to figure out how to replace him. But LA is a fertile ground for high school prospects. I'm sure Stan Johnson is leaving no stone unturned to get the right guys into his program. I think he's got a tremendous outlook for the program. It's been something that I think LMU has the potential to be very good in this league, and they've shown flashes. They just haven't been able to get over the hump, which I guess you could say for a lot of programs outside of Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and BYU. In last place in the league this year, Pepperdine. Nobody was expecting Pepperdine to struggle the way that they did, especially Coach Lorenzo Romar. One win in conference, 7-25 overall record this season. Um, they had a nice core nucleus of good freshmen coming in. Houston Millette led them in scoring. Maxwell Lewis, a great wing with size and athleticism and pro potential, as well as Mike Mitchell Jr., another backcourt player who can do a little bit of everything. But um, with knowing you had the youth, you needed to get some experience on your roster, and the guys that um, were brought into Pepperdine just didn't work as far as fit of program and style of how they wanted to play, fit and program of how they wanted to conduct themselves and be a part of building that program up. And so, unfortunately for Lorenzo Romar and the Waves, they had to let a couple of those guys go. So it was lean pickings on the bench this year for Lorenzo Romar. He had to lean on the freshmen that I mentioned. They fought valiantly. They played hard. I think they learned a ton of lessons. I haven't seen those names yet in the transfer portal, which is a great sign. If those three come back along with Jan Zedek, I think they've got the ability to have a much better season next year. Similar to LMU, they're right in the heart of Southern California in the LA area. You find a couple of the right guys that are overlooked by the bigger programs, and you got a chance to turn things around in a hurry. So, all in all, tremendous WCC year. 6 teams in the postseason, 3 in the NCAA tournament. Player of the Year, Drew Timme. Newcomer and Defensive Player of the Year, Chet Holmgren. And Coach of the Year, Randy Bennett. I look for the WCC to make continued strides and continue to challenge for multiple bids in the NCAA tournament in years to come. I mean, Gonzaga is a staple. St. Mary's has become an almost staple. And then if you can start getting these other teams such as Santa Clara and USF to have great runs, there's nothing but positive things for the league. So for Gonzaga Nation SI, this has been a WCC recap. I will be going in depth more on Gonzaga's season and a review of what they went through, what they did, and everything that occurred for the Zags.